Welcome to the Last Economy Podcast, a guide to the age of intelligent economics. Today we begin our deep dive into Chapter 4, the dashboard for insanity, GDP, and the meaning crisis. Okay, so let's unpack this chapter. The book kicks off with a really potent analogy. I want you to picture this. You're piloting a massive plane, a Boeing 747. You're flying right into a terrible storm, wings are damaged, maybe even on fire, losing altitude fast. It's bad. But you glance at your dashboard, point to one gauge and say, hey, the cabin pressure is stable, everything is fine. That analogy just perfectly nails the problem we're diving into today, doesn't it? Our main economic dashboard, gross domestic product, GDP, it's failing us.
Yeah.
Badly.
Yeah, it's a striking image because it emphasizes that the issue isn't just that the metric is, say, a bit old. It's fundamentally misleading. And what's really fascinating, the book points this out straight away. Simon Kuznets.
The guy who created GDP.
Exactly. Back in the 1930s, he apparently spent the rest of his life warning us not to use it as a measure of a nation's well-being.
Wow. So the creator himself knew its limits.
He absolutely did. GDP was designed, for a different era. It measures transactions involving scarce goods, things that cost money. That core design makes it basically blind to how value often gets created today, especially with digital information, abundance, things that might even be free.
And worse.
Well, worse, because of what it counts, just the money changing hands, it can actually end up incentivizing destructive activities. We're essentially using the wrong map, the wrong compass entirely.
Okay, so if GDP is the wrong compass, we need to look at where it's actually leading us. The book calls this the Hall of Mirrors, or the Perversity Gallery.
Perversity gallery, yeah.
It's where things that are actually bad for society somehow get recorded as economic pluses, as growth. Let's look at Exhibit A, the hurricane economy. This is chilling. The book offers a really stark quote. By GDP logic, the best possible year would involve every city being destroyed and then rebuilt.
Oof, yeah.
I mean, think about that. A hurricane devastates a city. That's a massive human tragedy, an ecological disaster. But the destruction itself doesn't show up on the GDP meter, does it?
No, not the loss, only the activity afterwards.
Right, the rebuilding, the insurance payouts, the government emergency funds.
Yeah.
All that frantic activity, billions of dollars. That gets logged as a stimulus package, as growth. We are literally recording a catastrophe as a net positive on the national books. It's insane.
It is. And, you listening might think, well, hold on, money is being spent. Right, people are working.
Yeah.
And yes, technically, but GDP is a gross measure. It doesn't subtract the value of what was destroyed. It doesn't account for the immense social cost. It mistakes that frantic cleanup and rebuilding effort for actual, genuine progress.
It's like breaking your window and paying someone to fix it, then saying you're richer because money changed hands.
Precisely. And this perverse logic gets even clearer, maybe even more disturbing when we look at health. The book calls this the cancer boom.
The cancer boom? Okay, tell us about that. Like, what's the GDP value of someone who's just healthy?
Well, essentially nothing. Zero. Maybe less than zero if they're, actively preventing illness through good habits. A healthy person, someone who avoids the healthcare system. They contribute very little to that part of the economy that GDP tracks.
Right.
But now consider someone diagnosed with a serious illness like cancer. The book gives a figure. A single case can generate up to, $400,000 in GDP?
$400,000 from one person's illness.
Yeah, through all the tests, the surgeries, chemotherapy, hospital stays, long-term care, all transactions. So from a purely GDP standpoint, prevention is an economic loss. It avoids all those transactions.
And a cure.
A cure, a cheap, permanent cure for cancer tomorrow, that would be an economic catastrophe according to GDP.
Because the whole multi-billion-dollar oncology industry would shrink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
GDP would signal a massive recession because a huge expensive sector vanished. The system, as it stands, structurally incentivizes managing sickness, not creating health.
So, okay, GDP counts disasters and sickness as economic positives. We've got that. But the danger isn't just that it miscounts, right? The book talks about this observer effect. When you start targeting a broken number, you actually start acting according to its insane logic. Is that the idea?
That's a huge part of it. It's deeper than just, say, fudging the numbers. The observer effect here means the very act of measuring, and especially targeting that measurement, changes the behavior of the system being measured.
How so?
We stop focusing on the actual goal, like, say, genuine well-being or connection, and we start optimizing purely for the number on the spreadsheet, just making the number go up.
Ah, okay. And there's a formal name for this, isn't there? The book mentions it.
Yes, Goodhart's Law, and it's perfectly stated in the book. Goodhart's Law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That sounds profound. How does that play out today?
Well, the book gives a brilliant and, frankly, terrifying example, the engagement trap with social media.
Ah, yes, engagement metrics.
Right. Platforms needed a number to track success. They picked engagement clicks, likes, shares, time spent scrolling.
Makes sense on the surface.
Sure, but then the algorithms, which are incredibly powerful optimizers, they got to work. Their job, maximize that engagement number. And what did they learn? What drives engagement most reliably?
Not thoughtful discussion, I'm guessing?
Not usually, no. It turns out anger is sticky. Fear is addictive. Outrage gets clicks.
Oh, wow.
So the algorithms began systematically amplifying the most divisive, polarizing, low-trust content, because that's what boosted the engagement metric. They effectively started tearing apart the social fabric, eroding trust, just to make a number on a dashboard go up.
So we targeted engagement.
And we ended up destroying actual connection. That's Goodhart's law in action.
That's deeply unsettling. The incentive structure itself becomes toxic. But the book argues GDP has an even more fundamental flaw, something called the abundance paradox. The idea is that our economy is built to measure scarcity, things that cost money. So when something becomes abundant or even free, GDP can't process it. It sees it as bad news.
Pretty much, yeah. It leads to this really powerful question posed in the book.
If the best things in life are free, why is our economy designed to measure only the things that cost money?
It flips the whole thing on its head, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So wait, explain this paradox. How can creating massive value, like trillions, actually register as a negative for GDP?
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but think about the mechanism. GDP tracks money changing hands for scarce goods and services.
Okay.
The perfect example the book uses is the Human Genome Project. Remember that?
Vaguely, yeah. Huge international effort, sequenced the human genome, cost billions, right?
Billions, yes.
Right.
Took over a decade. But crucially, they decided to make the data a public good, open access, free.
Yeah?
That decision unleashed trillions of dollars in new value. In medicine, biotech, scientific research,
Right.
it was revolutionary.
So surely GDP went up.
Actually, no. Its direct contribution to GDP was arguably negative.
How? Why?
Because by making that foundational genetic information free, it completely undermined existing or potential proprietary business models. Companies couldn't easily patent basic gene sequences anymore or charge exorbitant amounts for access to that core data.
Ah, so it disrupted businesses that relied on keeping that information scarce and expensive.
Precisely. The GDP dashboard, it's blinded by its focus on transactions and scarcity. It saw the collapse of those old, expensive, scarcity-based models. It couldn't see the explosion of shared knowledge and the immense value that created downstream. It just doesn't have a way to measure abundance.
Okay, this is getting clearer, but also more disturbing. GDP counts destruction as production,
Right.
and it counts abundance, like free knowledge, as some kind of economic collapse.
Yes.
But the book says the most devastating impact isn't even economic, it's spiritual. It talks about a meaning crisis.
Yeah, that's where it gets really deep. The argument is that maximizing this flawed metric, GDP, has inadvertently created a world that the book describes as rich in transactions and impoverished in meaning.
Rich in transactions, poor in meaning. Wow. How does that play out?
Well, the book breaks it down into kind of three core areas where this meaning crisis shows up. Areas where human flourishing is actively devalued by the GDP-centric system. First, there's the friendship recession.
Friendship recession. What does that mean?
Think about deep, trusting friendships, real connection. What's the GDP value of that?
Zero. Doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't involve buying stuff.
Exactly. The book calls it a GDP black hole. Friendships produce no transactions, but the economic system needs transactions to grow GDP. So what happens?
It finds ways to replace friendship with things that do cost money.
That's the argument. The economy systematically replaces those deep, free, authentic connections with monetized substitutes. Think social media platforms instead of face-to-face time, therapy sessions instead of confiding in a friend, professional networking events instead of genuine community, even paid companionship services.
And all those substitutes, they generate transactions, they boost GDP.
Correct. So the collapse of real human connection actually gets recorded by GDP as a net positive. The loneliness epidemic isn't just some unfortunate side effect. The book suggests it's almost a product of optimizing for GDP.
That's incredibly bleak. And that links to the second point.
Directly. The purpose vacuum.
Purpose vacuum, okay.
It's about what kind of work the system rewards, who gets paid well, Often, it's people involved in complex financial shuffling or managing corporate bureaucracies work that the book describes, maybe a bit cynically, as shuffling papers. This might not always create tangible, durable human value, but it often generates large transactions and thus high salaries and GDP contribution.
Right, we see those high salaries.
Meanwhile, think about work that is profoundly valuable to human beings: caring for children, teaching the next generation, looking after the sick or the elderly.
Essential work. Foundational.
Absolutely essential, but often it involves fewer direct, large monetary transactions. The book notes these roles often come with subsistence wages. So the system structurally rewards work that might feel pointless, while penalizing work that feels deeply meaningful, simply because of how GDP counts value, or fails to.
Rewarding the pointless,
Yeah.
penalizing the profound, based on transactions.
And the third area, this one feels very current: the attention annihilation.
Attention annihilation. Sounds dramatic.
It reflects the reality that there's now a massive, literally trillion-dollar industry built entirely around capturing and monetizing our attention, our focus. The attention economy adds algorithms, notifications.
Exactly. It's designed to hijack our minds, keep us scrolling, clicking, consuming. The book argues this constant bombardment is creating a population that's almost neurologically incapable of deep thought. That constant distraction. It's like mining our minds, which leads perfectly into this final, really powerful quote from the book on this. We are strip mining human minds and calling it progress.
Yeah. It's a stark way to put it, but it captures that sense of extracting something precious from us for economic gain, measured by this flawed metric. And this ties everything back to the immediate future, especially with AI. We are, as the book says, flying blind.
How does AI fit into this GDP blindness?
Well, think about what AI is poised to do. It's going to automate many information-based tasks, right? Legal advice, maybe personalized education, even some medical diagnostics.
Things that are currently very expensive, often involving highly paid professionals.
Exactly. AI could make these things incredibly cheap, maybe nearly free, accessible to everyone. That sounds like amazing progress, doesn't it?
Yeah, huge potential benefit for humanity.
But what will GDP see? Remember, GDP is obsessed with cost and scarcity. It will see the multi-trillion-dollar education sector shrink. It will see the legal profession contract. It will see parts of healthcare spending decrease.
So it will see sector collapse. It'll scream recession.
Precisely. The better AI makes the world in terms of access to information and services, the worse our main economic indicator, GDP, is going to look.
Wow.
So clinging to GDP as our primary measure of progress as we enter this age of AI, the book calls it a civilization-level suicide pact. Progress will look exactly like economic collapse if we keep staring at that broken dashboard.
Okay, let's try and boil this down. To summarize the main argument of Chapter 4 in one sentence, as the book suggests.
Yeah.
GDP, built on measuring scarcity-based transactions, is a catastrophic loss function that systematically registers destruction as production and abundance as collapse, leading to a systemic meaning crisis.
That captures it well. And for you listening, thinking about what this means day to day, here are the key takeaways we've unpacked from the book's analysis of GDP's flaws. First, GDP actually counts tragedies, think hurricanes, oil spills, even things like rising crime or divorce rates if they lead to spending as positive economic growth. It just sees the money spent, not the value lost. Second, targeting GDP, or any metric really, leads to weird, perverse outcomes. That's Goodhart's law. The social media engagement example shows how optimizing a number can actively harm us. Third, there's the abundance paradox. When really valuable things like knowledge or technology become cheap or free, like the human genome, data, GDP, can actually register this massive win for humanity as an economic loss because old, expensive business models get disrupted. And finally, the system, guided by GDP, ends up structurally rewarding work that might be low value in human terms, like some bureaucracy, while financially penalizing incredibly high value work like caregiving or teaching just because they don't generate the right kind of transactions.
So the diagnosis seems pretty clear, pretty damning. We've identified this core metric, GDP, as the faulty instrument guiding us into the storm. But these ideas that growth equals good, that GDP tells us if we're succeeding, they're really baked into our thinking, aren't they? They're deeply entrenched assumptions. They won't just disappear overnight.
No, absolutely not. There's huge inertia.
Which means we have to stress test this whole critique, right? We need to see how this new perspective shows up against the common arguments, the standard defenses of the current system. So next time, we're moving on to Chapter 5, the trial by fire. This is where the book directly confronts head-on The 7 most common fallacies, the main arguments people use to deny that this fundamental change is happening or needed.
The pushback, essentially.
Exactly. It forces a choice. Do we cling to the comforting, familiar lies of the old dashboard, or do we start building a new physics of value, a new way of measuring what actually matters? We really encourage you to join us for that next deep dive. We need to face that skepticism, wrestle with those counter-arguments if we're serious about figuring out how to navigate the future. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.